Hi everyone, thanks for joining in today. I'm really excited to have Kerry Fisher joining us today. Kerry writes contemporary women's fiction for women who've lived long enough not to expect the fairy tale. I love that. And she's written 10 books, 9 novels, and a non-fiction memoir, sold over 1 million books worldwide, and her work has been translated into 13 languages. She lives in Surrey with her husband, 2 young adult children, and loves cooking and gardening and having a house full of people. She often has to be shooed off to bed by her kids when she's temporarily overlooked the fact that she's no longer 20 and should not be joining in at the dance parties. So thanks so much, Kerry, for joining us. And Kerry's latest book is Other People's Marriages.
That's
And
right.
just want to also mention that I recently listened on audio to Another Woman's Child, which I think was the book before that one. Is that
That's
correct?
right.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. So I've probably got them here. There you are. So that's the latest one, Other People's Marriages. And that's a book I wrote. I think there aren't enough older women in fiction. I think there are a lot of 20s and 30s, and obviously I was that age once and I used to love those books, but actually I want to read now about women who've had enough life experience to know that you can't always get it right. You make mistakes, you do your best, you fall flat on your face, you make wrong choices with men. You love your children, but you don't always like them. They're the sort of people I want to read about. So they're the ones that I try and write about.
Yeah, and what I found with the one that I listened to, like real issues that you can probably sort of relate to as well. Would you say, is that common in all of your books?
Oh, absolutely. I try really hard to write about people that could actually be real. So a lot of my ideas for books just come from, if I'm looking, I'm not one of these authors that has 100 ideas that I can't wait to write about. I have to chip my ideas out of concrete. So when I'm looking for, because I want to write about real issues that real women can relate to, a lot of my ideas come from conversations with friends or random people on trains or buses or whatever. So I'll tend to just, if I'm looking for an idea for a book, I just socialize a lot, and eventually somebody will say a little thing that I think that's a really good idea, and then that will scratch away at me and eventually form into a bigger idea that can carry a novel.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if you want to start off by telling us a little bit more about Other People's Marriages.
So Other People's Marriages is about 3 women who met when they're at a toddler group. And, I remember going myself, and I always felt like the mother that wasn't quite getting it right. But anyway, these three women bonded at this toddler group and stayed friends for ages. And there's one very big character in the book who was the organizer, the fun bringer. She would organize the weekends away, and so they were friends for probably about 13 or 14 years, and then 2 of them fell out over husbands, really. And I think lots of women can relate to this, that you absolutely love your friends, but some of their husbands aren't exactly what you would necessarily choose for them. And later on, about 20 years later, there's one friend that stayed friends with both of them, but the other 2 suddenly want to get back together and bury the hatchet. And the third friend isn't very keen because she's frightened that a secret will come out if they do become friends. And so that's the sort of premise of the book. It's really about friendship and how we get things wrong, but sometimes, it's not worth losing what I call friends of the heart over, that we all make mistakes in friendships, but often we don't set out to intentionally hurt our really close friends. And one thing that I say to my daughter, who's navigating, the whole world at the moment, is, don't let small injuries ruin great friendships. And that's what the book book is about, although it's actually quite a big injury. So, you can make your own mind up about that.
Yeah. And we've already got quite a few people watching, which is great. Just reminding people watching, if you want to ask a question of Kerry, please type it in comments and I can read it out. Wendy says she's read on your website that you love to travel. And Wendy says so does she. You have a lot of different jobs in these places. Is there a job or experience which stands out and perhaps has been used in any of your books?
Oh, that's a really good question. And honestly, if you get me started about traveling, I will never shut up. I did French and Italian at university. So I spent a lot of time. I lived in Corsica, Italy. And then when I left university, I actually went to live in Spain because I didn't want the pressure, the academic pressure of having to be good at a language because I'd studied it. So I had some really strange jobs. I worked in Italy as a holiday rep, and that was an excellent ground for seeing other people's stories and just slowly absorbing them to be brought out 30 years later, because you really get a good insight into people's relationships when something goes wrong on a holiday and you go into their little apartment and everybody's sitting there. We are waiting for the holiday rep, and you can see there's always one person in that relationship who wants to smooth it and make it right, and then the other person is like, right, I will be taking you to court unless you sort this out. So that was very good training ground for fictional families, really.
No, that sounds fun. Margaret said, can you tell us something about yourself that can't be read or heard about from other interviews?
Oh, that is a very interesting question. I may have needed a bit more notice. The trouble is, actually, and I probably haven't said this in other interviews, is that I am so not a private person that actually I think that, there isn't a single thing that I've ever done, even things I'm bitterly ashamed of, that someone in the world doesn't know about, because I don't really, it's a funny thing. I don't really care what people think of me. I care if I feel like I've been rude or acted in a horrible way, then I care. But at this stage of my life, I've come to realize that we can't affect what people think of us, and often what people think of you is down to their own life experience, and we can't control that. So that's probably the thing that I've never said in interviews, is that I'm so unprivate that it's all hanging out there. And actually, okay, let's bring the non-cheery part of my life out early on. I wrote 4 years ago, my son had cancer, and I wrote a memoir about that because a friend, my best friend from university, in the period that he was ill, also lost her son to suicide. So we had this horrendous period of life, and we kept saying there has to be a book in this, and we wanted to write this book to help other people that were going through really difficult times, because we had each other to rely on, but lots of people are very lonely in that period of life, because people don't know what to do with you, and they don't know what to say, so they tend to run away and hide in the understairs cupboard. It takes a brave person to step up and say, I'm prepared to be part of your pain, so actually that book gives a really good insight into the way I think about life. And I have to say, it is nowhere near as uncheery as it sounds. It's actually quite uplifting despite the subject matter, but I'm lucky because my son's well now. So
yeah, that's great news. And I read that you had written that memoir. How did you find that after writing all your novels? Like, how different, and was it quite hard to do that?
It was a really interesting experience, because my friend Pat, that I wrote it with, wasn't a she was a head teacher. She wasn't a writer by trade, although she's actually an extremely good writer, and I take my hat off to her, the ease with which she came to writing. What was interesting about it was I was having to tell her, you know, there was so much that we wanted to say, and I was having to sift through it with a sort of author's eye of what's interesting to the reader, because we didn't just want to blurb out a load of stuff that wasn't helpful. So we decided early on that we would have to be extremely honest, because otherwise it wouldn't have felt authentic. And sometimes that was really hard because it meant making yourself vulnerable. I mean, both of us wished that, you know, there were areas of life that we wish we had done differently. I mean, you know, I found it very difficult when my children were young. I just, you know, that the sheer hands-on guidance that they needed and help, and I, you know, and in this book, I talk about that. I just wish I'd enjoyed it more. You know, if I'd known that I was possibly only going to get 17 years of it, I would have done it completely differently, with a lot less worrying about broccoli and learning to read, and a lot more going to the beach and having a good old laugh, you know, but you don't know what life's going to bring to you. So it was different in that way, that I had to actually look at our very personal and often very painful stories and sift through them for what would be interesting to the reader. So that was quite a challenge, but we've had some great feedback, so I think we did okay.
Yeah, and talking about feedback, I'm sure there would be, like with writing that sort of book, there'd be people with some really emotional stories and that to tell you. How did you handle that?
Well, I wasn't so worried for myself. I was really, so my co-author Pat works in mental health first aid now, and I was very concerned that she didn't get overwhelmed by other people's stories, because, you know, when people are struggling with, you know, especially with their children, but any relative who's struggling with their mental health, it's very exhausting, you know, because there often isn't, you know, well, most of the time there isn't an easy answer. And I was worried that she would, you know, because of course her natural drive is to help everybody, anybody she can. She would, you know, she would love to save any other parent going through what she's been through. So we decided early on that we would not have messages on our Facebook page. I get quite a lot coming to me, but then I can filter them according to where she's at. But I've had some amazing messages from a lot from mothers whose children have had cancer, and you know, there's something very powerful about sharing those experiences, especially people that are a little closer to it than I am now, and being able to say, okay, this is normal. Feeling like this is very normal. Good times come again, you know, they will come again. And I love that part of my job, you know, that and I guess it with fiction as well, that I might touch on something. I've written a book about parents who are estranged from their children. And I've had a lot of messages about that it's made them understand things better. And I mean, that's like, you know, somebody delivering a gold ingot to you, you know, it's just so fantastic to feel that something that you've written, I mean, not Take My Hand, but the fictional books that you've written for entertainment have helped somebody in their real life, you know. I mean, that's the best feedback that an author can get, but I also get horrid feedback too, so it's not all good. So I have people email me and say your book was absolutely awful, I wish I'd bought a Twix, you know.
Oh, really? And how do you handle that?
When I've had 10 books published now, so I think it's fair to say that I have a slightly thicker skin now than I did when I started. In the beginning, it used to make me feel absolutely awful. Now I've come to understand that you can't please everybody all the time. I also read a lot of books by a lot of well-known authors that don't really appeal to me, or that I give up on, but I absolutely don't feel the need to search out their email and tell them that. I just quietly shuffle the book away. And unless it's a very personal attack, which you do occasionally get. And to be fair, I think that often says more about where readers are in their lives than your book. I just think, well, you know, we all have different tastes, and I'm doing the best I can, so I can't affect it. So I try hard not to worry about it. But if I'm in the middle of a book and it's not going well, I might be like, oh, I really didn't need to read that today, you know.
Yeah. And Jill's wondering if you have a regular writing routine.
Oh, this is a really good question. So I was better when my children were at school, because I used to get up early with them, take them to school, and then I'd drive and drive to a local cafe and work there. Of course, as soon as they learned to drive, that routine disappeared. So my writing routine is extremely frustrating, particularly to me, but also to my husband, who is very focused. He just sits down and works, whereas I have this silly little butterfly brain that can't seem to get focused until I've faffed about. I'll sit down, I might write 2 sentences, and then I'll think, oh, I'd like to go to Rome next year. Let me just look at Airbnbs in Rome. And then I'll, you know, half an hour will disappear down that tank. Then I'll faff about on Facebook, or and then, you know, then my mum will call, so we'll have a chat. And eventually I've come to understand that all this faffing about is my brain getting ready to write. So when I actually do get going, it's quite quick. So, but it could take me 5 hours to do 2 hours of writing. And it honestly, it annoys me half to death that I can't just sit down and think, right, okay, because then I could be in my garden for the rest of the day. I could be doing other lovely things, but no, you know, sometimes at 7 o'clock, I'll still be sitting there. But I do set myself a goal. I write 2,000 words a day. And I have a few days, I actually have this on my calendar, I pencil in days for family dramas. So I know that I've got plenty of time to fit in the occasional family drama where I don't get any work done. And I actually do have that on my calendar. I'm going to allow that as a family drama day. You can have a family drama on Friday the 13th. You know? So
I hope everyone's obliging and make sure it is on that day.
Yeah, I know. I mean, honestly, with elderly parents and young adult children, there is always plenty of room for somebody needing something that I wasn't expecting. But anyway, we get by.
Yeah. And is writing your full-time job now?
Yes, I've been writing full-time for about 7 years, and I really, I mean, it is actually a real privilege, because it's, I love it, which is fantastic, because not everybody could say that about their job. But weirdly, as I've become more successful, it has felt more like a job. And I think that's probably because I've put more pressure on myself to do well. Whereas when I first started out, well, for a start, I had no idea whether I'd actually get published. But I was also ridiculously naive about the fact that publishers would want to have an input into what you write. You know, I was just joyfully writing whatever came to mind, you know, whereas as you go on, you get more, you know, you get pushed more into, this is what we think you should be writing. Although actually my publishers are really lovely, and I love my editor. She's very accommodating of my ideas, and she's very good at picking out the thing that I'm interested in and channeling it into something that's commercial. So that's good.
Yeah. And you mentioned about getting more successful in that. What do you think yourself means to be a successful author?
Oh, that is a very good question. So I suppose getting to a point where you're actually earning enough money that it becomes a job rather than just a hobby that, you know, allows for a few nice days out. it's extremely difficult to make money in the publishing world. So I actually feel really privileged that I'm able to do, I don't need to supplement my working life with another job. Lots of authors are running two jobs because, that's the way it goes. I think I was extremely lucky that my fourth book, The Silent Wife, was a breakout book that sold very, very well. I don't know whether I've got a copy of it here. Yes, here we are. That was the one that was. I always think, God bless The Silent Wife, because
the breakthrough
that
one.
that was my fourth book, and that was great. That did really well, and that sort of moved me onto another level. But I don't know, a successful author, it's interesting because a lot of the authors I like reading aren't really, really well known. But I can't wait to get back to their books. So it depends how you define success, whether it's a monetary thing or whether it's actually writing a really fantastic book that people love, or getting great feedback. I think it's a whole. I don't think you can just judge it by how many books you sell, or the fact you've been translated into Estonian or Serbian, or I feel extremely privileged to have been able to make it my full-time job. I think that is my answer to that.
And at the beginning we mentioned, like, your book has been translated into a lot of different languages. Do you find in out of the English speaking countries a particular country that your books are really, really popular in?
Oddly, I'm big in Poland.
Okay.
The Polish love me, and I've got a lovely publisher there. I won't even try and begin to pronounce it, but they're very proactive, and so my books have done really well there. I was on Croatia. Well, not me personally, but my books were on Croatian telly. They have a book club program. So that was incredibly exciting to see. I mean, I couldn't understand anything, but it was fabulous to see my book on there. And Italy, they quite like me. And I get quite a lot of, I get some lovely messages, I mean, thank goodness for Google Translate, because I get some lovely messages from my, 4 of my books have come out in quick succession in Hungary. And I've had some lovely messages from the Hungarians. So, I mean, it's actually incredibly exciting to think that something that, I mean, I'm very ordinary. And when you think, oh, somebody is actually reading my books in Poland, that's just really exciting,
amazing,
It never gets old, I never take it for granted. I'm always like, that's amazing.
And what about the covers? I've sometimes noticed, like, in different countries, and that the covers are totally different. Is that what's happened with yours?
An awful lot of countries have kept with the Silent Wife cover, and I think that's because it sold really well. So they just the places like I've had some. I wish I had them here. Actually, I'm not in my office at the moment. I came downstairs, so I've got better Wi-Fi downstairs, and I didn't want to keep blipping in and out. But the Estonian covers, the Serbian covers, Croatian covers, they're completely different. So they must have a sense of what appeals to their markets. The Italian covers are, as you would imagine, very classy, super classy. They're probably my favourite because they have all that sort of Italian elegance about them. They're lovely. But I mean, we don't get any say in covers really. I mean, even with my British, but I mean, they'll run it past you as a courtesy, and I might comment, and they might tweak a few things. But in the end, the author's job is to write a good book. Kerry Fisher sitting at her dining room table in Surrey isn't going to have a better idea than somebody that has all the data, or at least that's how I see it. I just let them get on with it. And also, I'm visually challenged. I have no idea what works, so I'm quite happy not to be part of any of that.
It must be quite exciting, though, seeing the new ones with the new covers and that when you first see them.
It is. It is. It's lovely, actually. And also, the other thing I like is hearing. We were just talking about the audiobook. I mean, I don't listen to them all the way through, but it's very interesting hearing Emma, who narrates my audiobooks, hearing her interpretation of my characters. I mean, she's very good. I mean, I don't know her personally, but we have a to and fro before she starts recording, and she'll say, "How do you envisage this character? What sort of accent do you think they have?" And so we have a bit of a chat, so she gets it right, and I think she's very good, actually. I'm lucky to have her.
And I think, did you say she's done all of your books?
She's done. She didn't do my first two because I was with a different publisher, but I think she's done the last six or 7.
And that would be quite unusual to have someone. So it's great you've been able to find someone you're happy with, and they've been able to do them all for you. Sarah Joy wonders what you like reading yourself, and we're wondering if maybe you've got anything you want to recommend to us.
Oh, I have lots to recommend. So I really like complex family dynamics, and I'm also quite attracted to books that talk about snobbery in society, or prejudice rather. I love books that just prick that pomposity bubble, that I don't know why that really appeals to me. So complex family dynamics are my real thing that I love. So at the moment I'm actually reading Leanne Moriarty's Apples Never Fall. And I'm loving that. I love her books, actually. I really, hats off to her. She's brilliant. She's the author I aspire to be. I don't know whether I think she's an American author, and I'm sorry, I can't actually remember her name, because when I read on my Kindle, I'm not as aware of who the author is, I'm sure you've come across the Paper Palace. That's, her name's Miranda Cowley. I'm not sure it's a double-barreled name. I really love that. That was a book I couldn't wait to get back to. I like The Girl with the Louding Voice. That was about racism. What else do I like? I've had a few historicals. I don't know whether you've come across Iona Gray. She wrote Letters to the Lost. She's a British author, but she's very good at... historical isn't necessarily my go-to genre, but she's very good at peppering in historical fact into the story, so it doesn't feel too heavy, if you know what I mean. So I love her book. I also love Kelly Rimmer. I don't know whether, she's Australian. And I've just read The Warsaw Orphan. I know Kelly because she used to be published by Bookouture, which is my publisher. So we have a bit of a connection, and she writes very, very well. She gets her finger right on the button of complex family dynamics. But recently I've read her historicals, and she does them very well. She's a really an excellent writer. So yes, they're my little go-to. But I like Jodie Picoult as well, Lisa Jewell. There's a British author called Dorothy Coomson. She writes very well. All of those, I read all the time.
Thanks for those recommendations. Sounds like some great ones there. Jill wonders if you have another novel in the pipeline that you're working on at the moment.
Yes, in fact, the reason I've come down all a bit hot and flushed was I was talking. So there's always a point in every novel I write where I think, honestly, have I just written a load of ridiculous nonsense that everybody's going to be like, nah, that wouldn't happen. So I've got this amazing agent. I love her. She's younger than me, but she's twice as wise. She's absolutely brilliant. So I sort of got halfway through this one, and I was like, right, Claire, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to send it to you so you can give me a reality check about whether I'm just writing a load of drivel, So I was talking to her this morning just before I came on here, and she was like, no, all good, just needs these tweaks. And she's got a really smart brain, can see where I've gone down a blind alley or something needs tweaking. So bless her. So I'm actually about 10,000 words away from finishing, which, if there are no family drama days, could be a week or 2 weeks, and then I'll go right back to the beginning, because sometimes you don't know until you get to the end of the book what the important strands were to pull out. You know, that kind of changes as you write. You start off with one idea, but there might be things that become more apparent you know, later on. So I'm actually sort of in the last throes of this novel, and it's slightly different from what's gone before. It's still very family dynamic, but it's just a bit more leaning towards the psychological suspense. So I don't know whether I've pulled it off. I hope I have, but I'm always riddled with self-doubt.
And when you start, do you know the ending of your book?
Yes, it's interesting actually. When I've always known the beginning and the ending, but not always what happens in the arc. With the publisher that I'm with now, I always have to submit a full synopsis of the book before I start writing, which initially I really railed against, because I felt that, you know, that was cramping my lovely artistic endeavor or whatever. But actually, honestly, when you get halfway through a book and you think, not really sure where I'm going with this, it's absolutely lovely to have that synopsis and go back to it and think, right, that's what needs to happen next. So although I'm probably a bit lazy in the sense that I hate pinning down everything that's going to happen before I start, I think it is actually a great time saver. I mean, I can write far more quickly now because I know what I'm supposed to be doing, than when I used to, you know, meander about thinking, oh, well, I'll just see where the writing music takes me.
And Sarah Joey said earlier you spoke about one of your novels was about estranged parents. Could you tell her what the name of that one is?
Yes, it's this one, The Mother I Could Have Been.
Okay.
Because shockingly, one in 5 families in Britain is estranged from somebody, not always children, but, you know, siblings or whatever. And, you know, I'm always, one of the things that really drives my writing is thinking about how, I mean, it happens in my own family. You can have 6 people in a room and everybody will have a different view of what was said and what happened, you know, and families can be, I mean, they can be such a source of strength, but they can also be so fragile as well. And I wanted to explore how it's often, when I got into researching The Mother I Could Have Been, you know, we tend to think that it's a really big event that blows families apart, but actually it's a drip often, and then there'll be something that happens that is the final straw. And I just find, you know, I find it really, really sad. And, you know, so I've spoken to quite a few people who are estranged from their adult children. And it's just such a difficult place to be. So I just wanted to have a look at that.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, do you have like friends or family or like maybe your children who are maybe slightly a bit scared to tell you too much because they think you might write about them in the book?
Actually, it's probably the opposite, that people come up to me and say, oh, you could write a book about my life. I mean, people do think that you really do take things from their lives. But I actually can honestly say, although people can read what they want into my books, that I never take somebody's life and then put it in a book. Because, you know, for the simple reason that if you do take somebody's life, you almost get constrained by what they are like, what really happened, rather than what serves a story. So at most, I will take a little thread of something and then weave it into something completely different. Also, because I love my friends and I would hate them to be hurt by anything I've written, or, you know, I mean, my husband never reads my books because he's like, oh, I just don't want to know how the real inside of your mind works, you know, which is funny, really. My son's not interested in this sort of fiction, and my daughter's probably just a little bit too young to be interested in it. But my mum never reads my book. She's incredibly proud of me. Yeah. She tells all her friends about me, but I think she's terrified of reading something in one of my books that will make her think, oh, I wasn't a good mother, you know, which is ridiculous because she was amazing. You know, but each to their own. I'm not offended by people not reading my books. And in fact, I still find it really awkward when people I know say, oh, I'm reading one of your books. And then there'll be this funny little silence where I think, and do you like it?
And are you someone who does like to share what you're writing, though, as you go along, or do you just wait to the end and give it to your editor?
I don't share it with anybody. I mean, you know, early on, a lovely author, actually, she writes amazing historicals, Jenny Ashcroft. We met right at the beginning of our writing journey. And of course, we weren't so confident about our writing then. So it was lovely to have somebody that she used to send me her stuff, I'd send her mine. Now there simply isn't time. Now we're working to deadlines. And also the thing that I've come to understand is everybody has a different view. So you might send it to 3 different people, and 3 different people will see things differently. So now, if I have time, I send it to my agent, but I've got a really good relationship with my editor. So, you know, and she really understands what I want to write. So I tend really to listen to her, and we work on it together. So it's not too bad.
And Jill's wondering if you've always wanted to be an author.
I have. I mean, the thing is, I'm extremely ordinary. So it felt like something. I didn't know anybody in publishing. You know, I left school in 1984. I didn't come from a publishing background. I didn't know any authors. So it seemed like something that would be amazing to do, but just wasn't really for people like me, if you know what I mean. You know, it just seemed too far out of my reach. But when I worked as a holiday rep, I started writing guidebooks. So I got a job on the side because I lived in Florence in Italy, of correcting guidebooks and checking out what had changed and that sort of thing. From there, I trained to be a journalist, which I was absolutely hopeless at, because I would always say to people I was in charge of real life stories, and I'd always say, oh, don't say that. When your mum sees that in print, she'll be so sad, you know. So I was useless. Got a job as a book reviewer, and that slowly planted the seed of, I'm reading lots of books, some were amazing, and some weren't that good, but still managed to get published. And I started thinking, oh, you know, maybe I could do this, maybe I could. But it took a long time from that maybe I could to actually getting published. I did lots of online courses with the University of California when my kids were young, because people think that you can either write or you can't, but actually, I mean, some people do have amazing natural talent, but the majority of people, just like learning to be a plumber or an electrician or anything else, you've got to learn the steps. So I did a lot of online courses, and, you know, slowly with the feedback, I did get better. And in those courses, I actually wrote my first book, which is the Schoolgate Survival Guide. And that was when I was funny and joyful, and I've got darker as I've gone along. I started off quite light-hearted, and now I'm getting darker and darker.
And how hard or easy was it to get that first book published?
Honestly, I think it got to the stage where my husband didn't quite say, when is this nonsense going to stop? But he was sort of going, they're advertising for shepherds. You know, so it took me 5 years and 3 books. So I'd written 3 books before I actually got published.
Okay.
And I'd probably had, I think, well over 120 rejections from agents. I just kept going and going. And the only thing that I kept thinking was giving up felt just slightly worse than carrying on.
Yeah.
But often it was a very close thing, you know. I really, really wanted it. And I just couldn't imagine life without making it happen. But there were many times where I just thought, oh, I don't know, I don't even know why I'm doing this, because it does take a lot of motivation and a lot of energy to sit and write something that's heading to an uncertain future, where you've no idea, you know, especially when you get to book 3 that's heading to an uncertain future. But I was very, very lucky that the second book I wrote in that period, I happened to bump into an editor at a networking do, and I just sent it directly to her. And so weirdly, after 5 years of not getting an agent, not really getting anywhere, I actually got a book deal and an agent in the same day. So that was weird.
Okay.
That was a good day. That was a happy day. So life suddenly came together, and then it all took off very quickly.
And Geraldine's wondering if any of your books have been optioned for TV or film, and if not, what one would you like to see as a movie?
This is a really interesting one. Oddly, I was just thinking about this morning, because I've actually surpassed any little dreams that I had been hanging on to in that time. You know, just getting published was incredible. And sorry, I'm going completely off topic here, but it is relevant. I actually went to see my first book coming off the presses with my dad. And it was such an amazing day, because my dad was, you know, my old dad was so proud, and, you know, it was just a really fantastic day. So that was already way, way more than I'd hoped to ever achieve. But I was thinking this morning, I'd love one of my books to be optioned. None of them have been. None of them have even got close. I think I would really like to see The Silent Wife be optioned, because I think it's about a sort of well, it's about domestic abuse, really. And I've had so many, I mean, terrifyingly, I've had so many messages from women saying, I felt you were writing about my life. I felt like you'd been sitting in the corner of my sitting room and watching what was happening in my house. So in some ways, I think it really speaks to a lot of women. And I think I was actually shocked about how many people properly related to it, rather than just reading it as a book that was interesting to them. So I think that would be good. And also there are a couple of scenes set in Italy in that book, which is always lovely. But I do think my latest book, The Other People's Marriages, that I think there isn't enough on TV about older women and their lives. And I think often older women, I was reading about it in the paper this morning, they're often portrayed as a bit senile or a bit past it, or whatever. You know, the women I know, I mean, I'm 55, the women I know, you know, easily 10 years older than me, they're vibrant, they're sassy, they're up for adventure, you know, they've got a lot of living to do. And I think it would be lovely to see this book features 3 women who are in their 60s, and you know, they're amazing. They're you know, they're full of life. There's still so much they want to do, and it would be lovely to see that on TV or in a film, because there's just not enough of it.
And how great that you are writing about people like that, because like you said, there isn't enough of that. And one thing I really liked about Another Woman's Child was the characters. Like, your characters really, really stood out. I'm just wondering, is there any character from any of your books that you'd really like to be for one day?
So oddly, in my first book, The Schoolgate Survival Guide, which actually is a weird title, because so in paperback it's The Schoolgate Survival Guide, but it's actually been renamed The Not So Perfect Mum on ebook. I think that's because they've got you know, probably 15,000 copies mouldering away in a warehouse somewhere that they haven't changed the cover for that, but they can do it on ebook. There's a character in that, Clover, who's she's very posh, but she's sort of a trust fund hippie. And she could not care less what people think about her. And she's very sweary. It's not, I've got less sweary as I've gone along because my editor has toned me down. Okay. So I started off quite sweary with quite a lot of sex. And now I'm a bit less sex and a lot less swearing. But Clover, you know, when I was writing, when I didn't realize that I had to curb myself because other people get very offended, she's incredibly sweary. She doesn't care what people think, and she loves her kids. And honestly, I just love her because she bowls through life, you know, absolutely oblivious to what people think about her. And sometimes, you know, I find myself thinking, oh, you know, especially if I've been a bit sweary with people that are a bit straight-laced or whatever, I think, oh, what are they going to think of me? You know, but I try not to focus on that. So I would like to be Clover. She would be my choice for the day.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for chatting to me today. It's been really, really great talking to you. Just wondering if you want to tell people how they can keep in touch with you and what books you have.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for having me. It's absolutely lovely, you know, and I know you're in lockdown, but I'm extremely envious you're in gorgeous Sydney because I love Sydney.
Hopefully
and I
you
cannot
can come
wait to return.
I hope you can come and visit us sometime.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So yes, I've got so I've got this big backlist of my 10 books. The one that has been the most popular is The Silent Wife, followed by, let me see if I've got a copy of it here, The Woman I Was Before, which is about what people post on Facebook. There we are. This is very topical. What people post on Facebook and what their real lives are like, and the difference between those two, and the perfection that we put out. You know, I actually make a point of posting photos and saying this is the 5 minutes in the whole evening where somebody wasn't grumpy, you know, because there are all those lovely photos of families, they're all smiling away like they're, you know, the Von Trapp family or whatever, and you're just like, okay, somebody didn't like their starter, somebody had knocked over, you know, anyway. So you can find me on Facebook. I've got a page, Kerry Fisher Author, so you should be able to find me on that. And on Twitter, similar, I think I'm Kerry Fisher Author on Twitter as well. I do a little bit of Instagram, and I'm Kerry Fisher Writes on that, but I'm quite rubbish at Instagram. I'm much better when I've got my daughter helping me, and she gets really frustrated that I can't get on top of it and share things properly or whatever. But yes, Twitter and Facebook, you can definitely come and find me. Okay. I do also have a website, but I'm sorry to say that I'm so technologically challenged that I'm not very good at updating it. So probably Facebook and Twitter are the places you're going to find the latest news.
Okay. And I have to ask you as well, when you sent me your photos, you had a lovely photo with your dog. Can you tell us a little bit about your dog?
Oh, okay, gorgeous dog. She was half giant schnauzer and half lab, and I loved her. I lost her in lockdown last year, and honestly it nearly broke me. I loved that dog so much, and I'd never really understood. She was the first dog that I'd had in my adult life. I grew up with dogs, but and I never really understood people who talked about their dogs as part of the family, but I properly understand it now. So because we're in a different stage of lockdown from you, we're starting to travel again. I decided not yet to have another dog, partly because I still miss her. But we're hoping to go and live in Rome for a little bit next year.
Nice.
just to get away. We have horrid, cold, dark winters in Britain, and I just feel like I would like some Italian sunshine on me. And of course, I have the bonus, lucky me, that I can work anywhere. So we're putting off getting another dog, although increasingly I am missing having a dog. So we'll get there in the end, but not yet.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but she looked very beautiful.
You know when you get a dog that, you know, with any luck you'll outlive them, but it doesn't hurt any less. It's horrible.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. It's been great, and thanks to everyone who joined in. We had some great questions.
Yeah, fantastic questions, and thank you so much for having me. And, you know, stay safe, guys, and hopefully I will be in Australia one of these fine days.
Yeah, hope so. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Right, thanks a lot. Cheerio. Bye-bye. Bye.